Hi again. Welcome back to this mini series where I'm sharing tips and my methodology for sharing empowering period and puberty education with young children so that they're starting their menstrual journey feeling confident, prepared, and ready. I'm Charlotte Puanto, the founder of First Moon Circle events for children aged 9 to 12. After hosting lots of circles in my local area for girls aged 9 to 12, I was asked by my community to share with them how I organize and facilitate First Moon Circles by other people who wanted to do the same for their own communities. 3 years on, and I've now shared my process with nearly 100 women across more than 15 countries in 5 continents around the world so that they can use this process but make it their own. And together, collectively, we're changing the narrative about menstruation, one circle at a time. I know you're here because you have a deep desire to do the same, to help your community and also to help yourself, maybe your own children too, to do it differently to how you experienced your menarche, that is, your first period rite of passage. Firstly, I want to thank you for all of your comments and questions that I've received since the first video went out. It's been brilliant to hear from you and to be able to support you. Keep them coming. I'm really happy to help and to encourage. The more period positive spaces we have in the world, the better. In the first video, we talked about learning much later in life that we have a cyclical nature inside of our menstrual cycles, and that we actually have different energies and phases across the seasons, and the grief that can come up when we realize that we wish that we'd learned this as children. I shared how you can create spaces and environments that open children up to wanting to learn more about periods, even if they've felt shame or been embarrassed about periods before. And I shared the kinds of topics that children should be knowing as they grow up, so they're feeling ready and prepared ahead of their first period. I also talked about the next most common question that our facilitators have, which is wondering about how to communicate knowledge about the menstrual cycle in an age-appropriate way, knowing how to engage them and how to remember, and how to do this all confidently. So today in this video, I'm going to go much more deeply into answering these questions. So grab a pen and paper and get ready to take some notes. So as adults, many of us are learning now about how we have a cyclical nature. And this is called menstrual cycle awareness, and how it isn't good for us to be on all the time, because we do actually need rest and downtime in order to avoid burnout. Children grow up in a body that has seemingly endless energy. They aren't driven by monthly hormones until they hit puberty. And then suddenly they realize that they've now got times of higher energy and times of much lower energy, and that they're changing in all the ways, physically, emotionally, developmentally, mentally. Things have changed. What is going on? It's really important that children going through female puberty know that they have these hormones that wax and wane across a monthly cycle, and that puberty, let alone life and schoolwork, is a high energy demand. We need to be sharing with children how they're changing and to explain it in ways that they can relate to. And we also really need to share this with parents as well, so that they get the message. Many parents whom in this day and age are trying to keep children busy and out of mischief, focused, constantly doing, learning and growing. This is the culture that we live in. But it can be really harmful. And I, for one, remember hitting puberty and massively needing to slow down. Before puberty, I used to do loads of sport, hours and hours. I used to play every single day for lots of different school teams and clubs, lots of different sports, training and games. And I felt able to do it. I loved it. I loved feeling the strength of my body and joining in with friends. But suddenly around the time of puberty, keeping up with all of that, as well as keeping up with more homework, and just struggling with understanding what was happening to me and who I was becoming, meant that I was really tired. On top of that, I needed to manage heavy periods, and that drained me a lot. So I ended up stopping a lot of sport, stopping a lot of what I was doing, and needing to take a lot more time for rest. I kind of went from doing everything to doing not much at all. And I look back now and I kind of wish that I hadn't given up on everything. But at the time, I just had no understanding, no support, no awareness of sometimes that I had heaps of energy and interest in being sporty and social and busy, and that I had more resilience and more capacity to do more. But sometimes I really did need downtime and the chance to replenish my spent energy. If I had known how my menstrual cycle worked at that time, what my body was trying to tell me, and if I had the tools to be able to listen to it and give myself what I needed, I think I would have had a very different teenage experience. Instead, I learnt my body couldn't be trusted, that it could really hurt me. It could embarrass me and let me down, but also that I could override it if I wanted to. Instead, if I had learnt that I was like the moon, sometimes dark and needing not to be seen, needing to recharge, ready to come back again, and sometimes I was bright and energized like a full moon, and that sometimes I would have more than enough energy to spare, I would have been able to chart my cycle and understand and accept my changes and know how to work with them. If I had learned at the time that the world around me was built for sons, that is, people with male physiology that are the same every single day, and I was actually a moon and it was going to have to learn to be a moon in a sun's world, then and the daily changes that I would have had across the month, I would have been able to advocate for myself, to accept myself, and to bring balance where it was needed into my self-care, into my activities, into my social and family life. And this is what we share in First Moon Circles, not just what periods are, the biology of menstruation and ovulation, what period products are on offer, but also that we need to live and practice cyclical living and cyclical self-care. We also really know that mums are new to this often and that they have to learn it in this circle, usually for the first times too. We want mums and caregivers and the children to take away skills to chart their menstrual cycles as they begin, so they can predict when they are going to be ovulating and therefore when they're going to be bleeding. And so they can factor in the different energy levels, requirements they will have at different phases around the menstrual cycle. In teaching mums and caregivers and daughters that they are moons together, they have this shared experience and they immediately understand the difference because they feel it in their bodies. They just know it to be true. They welcome this recognition and the magic of being recognized as moons. To share the different qualities and needs of the 4 different hormonal phases of a menstrual cycle, we use the seasons of the cycle, which you might be familiar with if you already know menstrual cycle awareness, to demonstrate these differences. Children have a lived experience of the seasons of nature, so they inherently understand what each season of the year is like for them, how they experience it, what they like, and what they find more challenging about it too. When we explain that their bodies now, at puberty, have their own inner 4 seasons a month, and explain how each week of a menstrual cycle mirrors the qualities of these 4 seasons, they immediately have a map for understanding how they will change around their cycle too. Of course, we also affirm that everyone has their own unique experience of their cycle, and it might be different to them outside of this archetypal idea of the 4 seasons. So where's the line? What's too much? We believe that these spaces are not suitable for talking about sex and sexuality inside a First Moon Circle for a few reasons. One, brain development and readiness for children to have these conversations is not suitable for 9 to 12-year-olds. That comes more with ages 12 to 14. We don't believe in denying children positive sex education, and we're certainly not awkward and embarrassed to have these conversations, but we do believe that 9 to 10-year-olds especially are just simply not ready for these deeper conversations, even if physically they've begun puberty early. We also think there's so much information that's being imparted in a First Moon Circle about periods and puberty alone that actually sacred sex and sexuality deserves its own space and time. We also really know the importance of seeking parental consent, and we think that one thing at a time, and we know that parents are often not ready for their child to have these conversations. Again, this isn't about being awkward, It's just about going at a steady pace and not overwhelming our children with too much information when they're not ready. This is why we don't cover it at this point. Having said this, since we are talking about menstruation and the biological function of a menstrual cycle is so deeply linked to fertility, we do include information on fertility awareness. In First Moon Circles, we give you a lesson plan, a script, and lots of support to understand how to discuss fertility awareness in an age-appropriate way without tipping over into a conscious sex education session. It's important that we explain what the hormones are doing and what an egg's function is, where it comes from, where it's going, and what can evolve from that egg, but also to explain why we have periods when these eggs aren't fertilized as well. And we need to explain to children about them having a fertile time of the month, not to scare them into thinking about how they could accidentally get pregnant, but to just give them this basic knowledge, this foundational knowledge that it is linked to their fertility. So in the First Moon Facilitator training, we're sharing so much information and having lots of discussions about how to respond to the most common questions we get from children, and also, of course, supporting the most common questions that come from facilitators. And broaching this topic is always one of them. Our training provides a full detailed lesson plan, which you can use to host beautiful, empowering sessions whilst creating a safe and inclusive space. We also recognize that not all people who bleed are girls and not all girls bleed. And we agree that not just those girls or those who will or do bleed need to know about periods. That's why we have a module dedicated to the diverse experiences of how different people can experience menstruation. And we build in guidelines to help you support children with different identities, abilities, and lived experiences. And we also talk a lot about duty of care, because lots of our facilitators want to support children other than just girls and their mums. We help you to approach this confidently and to understand how to support these different needs and challenges that can come with this. And we support your own learning and well-being as a facilitator as well, in order to be able to do this important work. So now we have facilitators who are not just hosting First Moon Circles for girls, they're also putting together circles for boys, for gender diverse children, for children with neurodiversities such as ADHD and autism, circles for dads and daughters, for boys, going into schools, and also helping women learn at what they've missed out on too. This is a really important part of it. All of this is possible through the First Moon Circle Facilitator training. We encourage you to take our format and truly make it your own, because everyone needs to learn about periods, every facilitator is different, and everybody can do this work. So you have your lesson plan, you know what to share, how to answer challenging questions and get support you need. You also know that explaining the 4 inner seasons of the cycle is how children and mums really relate to their inner self-care needs across the menstrual cycle. You know how to broach the topic of sexuality and fertility and what age and stage is ready for this conversation. And you know that children with different needs, abilities, and backgrounds can need additional support and have additional challenges that come up for them when learning about menstruation. You've got all this in mind. So now the next question is, how do you bring this all together and get your youth mentoring work, your business work set up so that you can draw in the right families to your circles? How do you go about promoting these circles, taking bookings, making sure you're doing your due diligence to work with children and feel confident and have the right mindset in order to know that you're enough and that you are ready to go and get the show on the road? I'm going to tell you all about this in our final video coming soon. Check back in 2 more days for the final piece of the puzzle. And please do share below your comments and your questions. I'm here to help and support you at this time, and I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much.